unmuted. Appreciate it.
Potentially be used instead of
You have your microphone. That is just Here we go. Try that.
Okay, so kind of extending off of Senator Hawks' question. Yesterday, we had a conversation about the request of $26 million to the Board of Regents, and there was actually a substitute motion that was made, which failed in regards to having about, I think it was $3 million go to private colleges. And one of the points that the governor made, and I think the reason why, and I can't explain the reason why she voted no, but she said that we could come back in round 2 or 3 with the Spark Committee and have those funds distributed there. And so then I'm looking on the back page where we have another $13 million as requested by the Board of Regents on top of the $26 million that was approved yesterday by the State Finance Council. And this is for the distribution to institutions for higher learning for costs associated with moving learning to online course delivery. And I know that, well, Senator McGann and I are on the Spark Committee, as are Senator Hawk and Representative Wolfmore. And actually, Senator McGann and I were in the same breakout session. We had a discussion on this, on moving higher education into an online format. And so I'm wondering, perhaps the request of the Board of Regents, maybe that would be a discussion for the Spark Committee as opposed to the $50 million that's been appropriated in Senate Bill 66.
Mr. Chairman, I might note that this money was requested by the Board of Regents on the 15th, which was obviously before yesterday's meeting. So the Board of Regents would be available to answer that question if they are, if they have received sufficient funds, if they receive the entire $26 million.
And I have been told that Blake Flanders is on. He was supposed to be on. We can ask questions later in regards to that. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy, can you tell us why the Department of Corrections withdrew their request?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have the exact reason, but my understanding is that may be related to the fact that these funds, there is federal funds available, but I would defer to the budget director who makes his presentation. So I believe that they will have these expenditures covered. They just simply don't
Robin's
have the
I'm
same
gonna chat with her to see if she can unmute
to
this.
make those expenditures.
They submitted these on May 7th. I would assume for PPE and cleaning supplies and type things, and probably really expended some of that.
Mr. Chairman, I would note that there's, as was discussed yesterday at State Finance Council, there's been a number of expenditures already made by state agencies for COVID-related items.
Whoops.
And you probably don't know why Department of Health and Environment revised theirs. Okay, thank you.
Senator McGann.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to go back to Senator Hawks' question. I'm looking forward to the information from Mr. Campbell that during that presentation, there are dollars that can be paid for through other sources. And I have some questions about some other things, but I think the limits amount that we submit, and I think this was talked about on our Zoom meeting. Those dollars will lay there and they can just lapse back into our next budget and help our SDO bottom line. So I think we need to be very careful about how we spend this money, because the way I view it, Mr. Chairman, is I don't think we have to spend it all. And so I just hope that we're looking at trying not to spend it. It's almost like an emergency fund, because we didn't know when we put that fund together that we were going to have possible other sources available. Thank you.
Well, and I would agree with Senator again. Obviously, when we put the budget together and agreed upon between the House and the Senate, and then it was passed on March 19th, we had no inclination that the federal government was going to be distributing $1.2 billion to the state of Kansas. And actually going through the documents yesterday from the particular agencies and departments, I do have to admit that I was a little reluctant because it looked like some of the items that were submitted as being COVID-19 related was not. I think there was a reason, maybe some agencies and departments parlayed that into being COVID-19 related. But just reading the document that we had in our binder yesterday, I couldn't see a direct correlation for COVID-19 after we had the same request at the beginning of session. And so I think that some of this could actually be taken care of and paid through for the federal dollars that the state of Kansas has received. We can have the amount that was allotted in the budget bill lapse back into the state general fund to help us with the deficit that we're going to be facing in fiscal year 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I probably would just agree with what Senator McGinn and the chair said.
That's what happened to me yesterday.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping that we can get today is an idea of what on this green sheet can be covered federally, so we can take it off the table for today's discussion at the $50 million. I don't know if the budget director will be able to do that, but if we know some of this or have a pretty good idea to be covered, let's just, my opinion, just take it off the table and not consider it this time. And the other point about that $50 million, we don't know what the future is for the rest of this year and what may happen COVID related. It would be nice to have that in reserve. Should we need it? Should we have a big step away when we have other needs that the federal government doesn't cover? Thank you.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo what the other committee members have said about this, especially if you're looking at Kansas Department of Aging and Disability and the nursing home facilities money. It seems like a very clear COVID-related expense. So I'm kind of disappointed that we're not looking at it this way, but I suppose we have to go through the process. But that seems clear to me. One of the other questions, Amy, I'm not sure you can answer this or not, is the 11.6 million, which that's a Families First program. It seems like it's a very close amount to what was asked for Families First.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that you're talking about the amounts for the Department for Children and Families. And I believe that's for the foster care caseload, not specifically Families First. So that's foster care caseload from the consensus caseload estimates.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the 37 million, 18 million for the job creation fund. I see there's 16.7 million in it. I guess, I'm not sure you gave this, probably more for the budget director, but it was something that was, the budget director did say yes on, but yet it doesn't relate to public safety it doesn't relate to budget stabilization. It doesn't have matching funds. I'm not sure that is a good use of the $50 million. So maybe more of a statement anyway. You don't have to answer.
I'll say you want the budget director to answer that question. Try attempt to answer that question, which you have that with me, versus the committee. The one thing that I would probably say to the committee is for the SPARK committee that pretty much divided the remaining approximately $600 million that the federal government has allocated to the state of Kansas into 4 sectors. And that's education, healthcare, infrastructure, and economic development. And I think when we go through each of these items, we can try to see if that particular item would possibly factor into one of those 4 different items that the SPARK committee will be looking at for the remaining $600 million that we're receiving in the CARES Act. Are there any further questions? Senator Hawk.
Not a question, but a response to Representative Hoffman. I did ask this question. One of these meetings are running together. Is today Thursday?
Probably Thursday.
But I asked a question about on those SBA loans that we had, how many get? So what might be the magnitude of the need out there, either for this group to consider or SPARK? And the feds would not release that SBA data. I guess they consider it proprietary. But a part of that conversation was this job creation fund then. And I think that is an important thing for us to seriously consider because in terms of getting back, we need to be able to create jobs. And there might be as many as 10,000 jobs that we could create with this particular fund. But I also agree with you, Mr. Chair, that if we can use the SPARK money for that, that's a much more appropriate fund to do that. And I would hope that we could use SPARK money. So, but I don't want us to dismiss that. I think our unemployment and the jobs that are lost is a COVID-related thing and directly related, and it will be a critical part of our recovery. Thank you for both of your comments. Just add that little piece of information.
Just a follow-up question, Amy. Is there a carryover from the request here on this page that was approved yesterday in the State Finance Council? Is there an overlap?
So the money that you talked about yesterday in the State Finance Council was all federal monies, so they did not discuss the $50 million. Is that the question?
Well, we had, I think it was, I don't know what the appendix was, year B, and it had all the state agencies listed that was requesting or had received federal dollars through the CARES Act. And I was just asking whether or not some of these items that were requested may have been funded through that and approved yesterday, as opposed to what is remaining on. Okay.
I'm not sure how much overlap, if any, there is. The budget director may be able to address that question.
All right, we'll ask Director Campbell about that. Any further questions? Senator Hall.
Sort of an overlap question on that Board of Regents fund. Again, I would make a comment. I would guess that money is really needed because every regent institution I've talked to has a huge hole from the money that they've had to distribute both to students for dorm contracts and tuition and their costs of setting up distance learning. But the same comment on the other item. I believe they got some money from the CARES Act and not the part that SPARK's looking at, the other piece of the CARES Act. And I just wanted to verify that that was true. And I'm not sure how much they got.
Mr. Chairman, the Institutes of Higher Education did have a second pot of federal CARES Act monies. We can certainly give you a list of those by institution if you're interested.
I think you gave us at Ways and Means meeting that we had in April, a breakdown of what, there were at least a dozen different allocations of that money, and I think higher ed was part of it. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we do have a handout that we could provide the committee that I believe will answer the senator's question.
I was gonna say, because I think in one of the previous meetings we had actually mentioned, you know, whether or not this is Blair's Day or whatever, because of all the meetings we've had. Of course, the state of Kansas received $1.2 billion. Some of those funds were allocated to Johnson and Sedgwick counties. There was also approximately about another $1 billion that was directly allocated to certain entities. And we received that yesterday in a state finance council meeting, which we had to approve, given House Bill 2016. And that had the direct allocation of all the, basically the, 2.2, 2.3 billion that the state of Kansas received, and the institutions of higher learning was on that list. And so it has the dollar amount of how much each region school received as a direct allocation from the federal government in regards to the CARES Act. And so we're going to try to get that passed out so everybody can see exactly what the dollar figure was.
students, for the faculty students. So my question, has this money already, have the checks been written and that money distributed to the regents and higher education, and have the students gotten their money?
Mr. Chairman. Apologies, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that that money went directly to the universities from the federal government, so they have received that. And my understanding is that those funds have been distributed to the students already.
And then so clarification, most of the CARES money goes into a grant fund to the executive branch, but some of it goes directly.
Mr. Chairman, a large amount goes directly to the individual agencies that apply for those grants, or in the case of some of the pots money, including the higher education, went directly to those institutions from the federal government and did not come into the state treasury.
And was that also true of Johnson County and Sedgwick County that got there? Did those county allocations go directly to them?
Correct.
Checks were written to them and they
Correct.
received those?
Those went directly as grants to those counties. So those counties were responsible for ensuring that they meet all the requirements that come along with those funds.
So now for my paranoid question. One of the things I think all of us are legitimately concerned about is if the CARES money is not spent accurately and appropriately, the federal government can come back and ask us to repay it. Is the state going to be liable for these monies that went directly to the regions and to the counties if it's not spent appropriately once there is an audit? Or do we even know the answer to that question?
Mr. Chairman, so as with all federal monies, it's required to be accounted for by the entity that draws down that money. So if it was went directly to the region's institutions, they would be responsible for fulfilling those conditions of receiving that money. If it went to the state, for example, the 1.34 billion that came directly to the governor's office and is being dispersed via the SMART committee, that would be the responsibility of the state to ensure that those monies are expended in the manner in which the federal government requires.
So I can check this off my paranoid list. Good.
Well, and kind of going off of Senator Hawks' comment yesterday when I was on the phone with Governor Kelly, we were having a discussion about some money that was distributed by the federal government directly to particular entities. And when she and I were on the phone, we were talking about healthcare facilities where the state is not aware of those dollars that went directly to hospitals. And, you know, she had mentioned a particular hospital, and then I checked with my local hospital to see how much they received. And that didn't seem to have any type of pass-through to the state. And so I guess, are we responsible for that if the hospitals, okay, everybody's shaking their head, so I guess not.
Yeah, so if I could try to clarify my earlier statement. So the entity that received the money from the federal government in this case does sign that they will accept the money and use it for the appropriate purpose. So the entity that acknowledges and pulls down that federal money is responsible for meeting those conditions. So in this case, it didn't come through the state and then be distributed further to the hospitals. So the hospital.
So they will be individually responsible.
That is my understanding. I would defer to the terms and conditions of those grants.
So our attorney is saying that is the case. And then also going off of what Senator Hawk was saying in regards to Johnson and Sedgwick, because they had populations more than 500,000, that's why they had a direct allocation from the CARES Act. And during yesterday when we had Director Harrison Lee go through the details of the spark money that was going to be requested from the State Finance Council, she had indicated that there will be clawback provisions with the counties. Is that going to be the same with Johnson and Sedgwick if that money is not spent by round 2?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that they received that directly, so that the state
So it will
would
not
not
be
be.
part of that.
Correct.
Because we're talking about if the money is not spent, then the State Finance Council will be able to reallocate those funds as a purpose that we see fit. Any further questions for Amy? Senator Hawk.
Just a question to follow up here. While we could not, as a state, claw back Johnson County or Sedgwick County, I wonder if they might have the option to, if they do not have specific things that they need to allocate that money to. I'm thinking specifically, my own concern is that we get our unemployment fund built back up. And I throw this out as kind of a rhetorical question, but maybe we want to at least make the suggestion that should they not spend those funds, we would like to find an answer. Could they allocate that money into our state unemployment fund rather than send it back to the feds, knowing that those 2 counties have also used a lot of that state unemployment fund. So I just throw that idea out for us to keep on the back burner as we work through this until December 30th deadline.
That would probably be a question maybe for Director Campbell on whether or not those 2 counties would be able to allocate any unused funds to the state unemployment fund.
Yeah.
I would surmise probably not, just given the fact that that was a direct allocation for the federal government for COVID-19 related items. And I don't know if there's any stipulation that the state can put in place of any unused funds going to the unemployment fund.
Mr. Chairman, I would certainly defer to the director. However, that would be, since again, they are the ones that are liable for meeting those terms and conditions, it would be up to them to determine if they would be willing to expend the funds in that manner, because they are responsible to the federal government for how those monies are used.
I just raised that as a back burner possibility. There may be other things that, and I knowing the complexity of this money and the lack of clear guidelines that the feds have put out, I certainly want to make sure. I think we have the need, whether or not we can come up with things that fully meet the guidelines and get some of these funds expended by this short deadline. I just would want to make sure that we kept every stone turned over for possibilities to help our economic recovery. So I'd certainly want to make sure that that was a consideration. Maybe there's something else besides unemployment that would be a bucket that needs to be refilled. And so I just raised that. We keep that in mind.
Well, I would think that any money that is not used by Johnson and Sedgwick County, I would hope that it be used for economic development.
Yes.
For those particular counties, because they could actually make a correlation to COVID-19 and use any unused funds for the economic development of those particular counties. Senator
Perhaps maybe that job creation fund we talked about a few minutes ago as another.
Again, that's a state function.
Maybe there will be a Johnson County, Sedgwick County job creation fund in partnership. And just, I think we're going to have a whole lot of creative budget thinking that is beyond what we've had to deal with in the past to make sure we responsibly but thoroughly spend this money. And I think we're going to need every penny of it for our state's recovery if we can be clever enough and find the right ways to use it.
Any further questions for Amy? All right. Thank you for being here and giving us the overview of the items that have been requested. And so right now we'll turn it over to the Division of Budget and have the Director of Budget, Larry Campbell, which I think is a few of the questions that are already ready for you. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Director Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will start by saying just about everything I heard here today, we have thought about at length. So I should have an answer to you on your questions, on just most of the questions. If it would be okay, Mr. Chairman, from the questions I just heard, could I wish I'd have heard these questions before coming here today. I came in prepared to just go through the applications, but if you're okay with this, I'll take a few minutes and I think it'll be helpful. And just give a quick recap. So what happened was $1.25 billion was applauded, it was allocated to the state of Kansas. $1.25 billion in what we call the mother fund, because that was not specifically to all the other agencies. That's what came into Kansas. That's what the Spark Committee and everyone was working on. However, out of the $1.25 billion, $116.3 million went to Johnson County and $99.6 million went to Sedgwick County. It came out of that $1.25 billion. So back in early on, we received wires for $1.034 billion. $1.034 billion, which is absent the Johnson County and Sedgwick County. So that's the number we're working with. Then there's another $1.6 billion approximately that has gone into all these other agencies. And I think you got a printout, or you're getting a printout of that. And that, for example, the best example of that is the FMAP. So to get home and community-based services out. So when the virus, the pandemic started, money started flowing from the federal government to try to help. The FMAP went up to 6.2%, I think, and about 58 million, 62 million came in. We didn't even, when applied for, it's just part of an existing program that they're trying to help. Well, that's pretty much the same explanation of all those other funds. So they sent 84 million, for example, to K-12. The feds did. We can't do anything with it. The feds sent it to K-12 saying, this is what you'll do to it. If we would say, well, no, we want to have some jurisdiction over it, they'd go, we'll send the money back. So you all fixed that in the State Finance Council yesterday. 2016 not only took jurisdiction, the State Finance Council not only took jurisdiction of the $1.034 billion, but in that bill, you sort of latched onto or tried to pull in all the other agencies, which was, just everyone is moving and trying to do the best they can as fast as they can. But that was fixed yesterday. So we're talking about the $1.034 billion is federal funds. And even in our shop, it's easy to go, well, which are you talking about? The 50 million emergency state money? Because everyone calls it SCRF or COVID money. But the emergency 50 million is a state general fund, and that's what we're here to talk about today. All of that other money is under the State Finance Council's authority to spend. Yesterday, 400 million was approved. I just kind of thought maybe that would help to pinpoint what we're doing here. And if I can be bold and say, as we go through these item by item, I think I can answer every question that I've heard here. But we have, the budget department has about a 37 million that we would recommend. And if you all do that, we would love to lapse the 13, that would help. So we're trying to find pieces. I can tell you we're being as creative and, but on solid ground legally. But man, we need every help we can get. And for example, what they talk about the regions, the gear money went all to the regions yesterday, 26 million. Well, yes, we need to take that back, but we're in a backdrop of 650 to 700 million hole. And so, man, if we can just get through this without too much pain, I think everybody should feel great. So if we could hold harmless, as you said, that's a big win. But I know that's for later. But anyway, that I wanted to say sort of about some of the questions that I've heard here. And if you're ready, I can just go down through each one of these, and some of them we just need to take off the board because they have been funded. And I'd also tell you this. Okay, yes, let me explain this. This is sort of unique. When you pass the bill, you put the budget department in the loop. well, this has never been done before, so there's nothing for us to draw on. Our department, we came up with this application. I just thought through from a lender, what do I want? If I was going into my loan, my board meeting and trying to get approval on a $50 million loan, which is I have all my life, what would I want? And so we did the best we could to supply you this. So right after the bill was passed, we threw up on our website an application. We didn't do any restrictions, no restrictions. The idea was, I told my folks that let's not be the ones to hold this up in any way. And so we try to do 24-hour turnaround. So an application would come in. Mainly, our job was to do this because I actually felt like it was presumptuous of me. I actually felt like it was presumptuous to make a recommendation. And I called Senator McGinn and after the bill was passed, and I mean, the law was just, we get the applications and send them on. But I asked, like, what do you want me to do? Do you want some extra? She said, yeah, would you make a recommendation? And I felt this is, I know you guys have the authority to do that. So my recommendation is just my opinion at the time. Also, we're in a backdrop of, April was mentioned, something about April. That was a lifetime ago for us. Things are changing so much. And for example, their guidance came out, one guidance came out that can the counties share that money with the cities? Absolutely. Shall they? Well, they don't have to. Same document. Page 2 said, yeah, you should share this with the cities. Page 7 said, well, you don't have to. So that's the way it's kind of been all along. And but we do not have a jurisdiction at all. Johnson County and Sedgwick, that is a direct deal. They accepted that grant. They gotta, prove it out or supply receipts or be responsible for that. With that, I think that just shows you what happened. You guys passed a bill. I threw an application up immediately, and some of these, so we did two things basically. Some applications came in that weren't complete, they just weren't complete, and we'd send them back and say, well, you need to do better on answering this question. That wasn't necessarily for me, that was for you to have a good tool. But that was our job, just to make sure the applications were thorough enough that you could make a decision. And then, like I said, early on, after talking to Senator McGinn, I did make recommendations, but everything started changing. Early on, it was all about life and stopping the spread. And we didn't know how, or if there'd be an overrun on hospitals, on and on. So it was really focused that way. Then as it went by, we heard from you all. Everyone was starting to worry about economy. So that's why about halfway through, I went, guys, let's give them the rest. Let's give them the pros and cons. I'm not going to make a recommendation. And I was waiting for this meeting. If you want something different going forward, I'd be glad to. But I just, after a while, thought, I'll make the recommendations that we thought. But and the reason why, if you're in a world of prioritizing, and each and every one of us would prioritize something differently. So because of that, I hope that just gives you a little backdrop of what you've got. Mr. Chairman, I didn't know what you want me to do, but I can go through these pretty quickly. But I also know that the agencies will want to advocate for themselves or dive deeper if you've got questions specific about some numbers from the agencies.
Well, and thank you, Director Campbell. And actually, given there's, I would say, a few items here, and some of those actually have been withdrawn by the agencies. Right. So I think we'll just open up the conversation. You don't have to go through each one of them individually. And if one of the members of the committee has a specific item they want to discuss, they can just ask you in regards to that. Like I said, that way it just kind of keeps the conversation more fluid. And then if you're not able to answer the question, we can turn it into the individuals who are on Zoom, and possibly they can answer the question that the committee members might have. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to make sure I heard this correctly. And I thought you said that 37 million you're recommending to spend in this and 13 million can maybe return to the budget. Is when you in saying that, are you saying that 37 million couldn't be covered by federal money? That's what I'm trying to get. I think we're all trying to get to the point, what can we push off to federal? And what are you recommending that we really need to spend because it won't be covered by federal? I think that's what at least I need to know. And by the way, thank you for all your work.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Truly appreciate it.
Well, I have an explanation for each of these, and that's the process we use to make the recommendation. Could it be used, could money come elsewhere, that kind of thing.
So I think what I heard you say then is that 37 million probably needs to be spent of this 50 because it can't come from elsewhere.
Or is not of a priority we would recommend.
Okay, thank you very much.
And actually, committee, you should be getting a handout from these approximately $17 million that was approved by the State Finance Council yesterday. So we look at the individual items per agency on how much they received on those particular items. Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Campbell, thank you for being here. A couple of things. One, the Veterans Affairs deal, that was going to be a GBA. We'd already discussed that. They were short. So that's obviously not a COVID. That was before COVID. I understand that. So I'm okay with that. But I do have, even in the request here with KDADs, how is that not COVID related money? I mean, it is, and even in the proposal, it's talking about COVID expenses. I just failed to understand how that would not be considered COVID money.
Which is why I put no recommendation. And at the end of the application is my narrative. And so the reason we're not, every single one of these, I will also say, are real requests and needs. But having said that, we think that is correct. That could be applied for by CRF, and that's why I'm not recommending.
Okay. I'm just curious how it came before us. All the applications came before us, no matter what your recommendation was.
This is new. You all funnel these through the Department of Budget. That's kind of new. And so there's been no track record or precedence. So absolutely, if we got an application, we send it to you. It wasn't for us to hold it up or deny it or approve it or anything. So I just took the applications and started emailing them to you guys starting in April.
So, Mr. Chairman, what would be the appropriate, how will we turn this down, for instance?
Well, and probably how this will work, and I need to confer with either Jill, JG, or Amy, is that we will go through each of these items because according to Senate Bill 66, when we allocated $50 million for us to review, then we make a recommendation to the Legislative Coordinating Council, and the Legislative Coordinating Council decides whether or not those funds will be appropriated or not. So at the end of this, we will probably have a recommendation discussion on whether or not we feel we need to recommend this to the LCC. And then I think that's up to Senator McGinn and I then to parlay those recommendations to the Legislative Coordinating Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett.
Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping that we could maybe take these a little bit in order, but the first few items on there, I'd like that. On the Department of Children and Families, this is a request because we didn't return for omnibus, and this is to adjust case loads. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct, and why we're recommending it come from this fund.
And if we don't, we won't draw down any of the federal dollars.
Right.
They go with that. Okay. And then the Department of Corrections and the Department of Health and Environment, those are requests have been, well, the first one, Department of Corrections withdrawn, and I assume that's because they received other dollars.
They received money.
Correct.
Correct.
And then Department of Health and Environment is revised. Is it a revised number or a revised request?
The number revised because they obtained some funds. I believe they received 11, let's find the, I can point to, I think I can point you right to where you need to go.
That's the same number. Original song.
I better let them answer specifically because I had it highlighted and I don't see it now, but they did receive some, and so this is just, they reduced the request, and it's for 21.
So, Mr. Chairman, since we have Zoom set up, can we hear from the Department of Health and Environment?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
And from the Department of Health and Environment, Dan Timish or Ashley Gross, are you available to answer the question by saying it again? Do they know that?
No, I don't know that.
And if you wish to address the committee, please unmute yourself on Zoom. Seeing them on there.
They're up there in the upper left-hand corner.
There's 5 people sitting around on them too.
Right. I think they were.
And from the Department of Health and Environment, Dan Timish or Ashley Gross, are you available?
They need to turn their volume up there.
Yes, this is Dan Timish, CFO for KDHE. The initial request was $13.1 million. We received ELC money from the CDC, and $9 million of that funding was able to be applied to cover the salary and wages. That was part of our initial request. So we've reduced the request from 13.1 to 4.1. And the $9 million was CDC federal funding that we didn't know about at the time we submitted the initial request.
Take mine off.
Senator.
We could not hear you very well, so could you re-clarify? You said your initial request was 13 million, heard something about salaries and wages, and so we're still trying to understand the difference in the request.
Can you hear me better now? So the initial request was reduced by $9 million as a result of funding that we received from CDC related to ELC, which is epidemiology and laboratory capacity. At the time of the initial request, we weren't aware that that federal funding was going to be available to us.
Could you explain then the 4 million for salary and wages, contracted services? I think we get testing supplies and protective equipment. Did we need to hire more people, or what was going on there?
We were assisted by CALD in the development of the initial request, and the amount that is being covered with ELC funding as salary and wages only. It's allowed to be used for contact tracing and case management and reporting for salaries and wages. And out of the initial 13.1 million requests that CALD developed, there was 9 million related to salary and wages. So that is the reason why we can fund 9 million of what was the original 13.1 request out of the ELC funding.
I'm trying to understand, Mr. Chairman, did you have an increase in the amount of people you needed, or increased hours, or I don't understand Did you not use your normal workforce to do these things? Why do you have an increase in salaries? Your request for that.
Hi, this is Ashley Goss, Deputy Secretary for Public Health. So this request came through from the local health departments through the Kansas Association of Local Health Departments. And Dennis Kriesel is on the phone as well, who can answer specific questions to the locals. So Senator McGinn, in answer to your question, this money would be passed through essentially back to our local health departments. They have identified the gaps in order to continue to address the COVID crisis that we're in, which of course we don't see going away anytime soon. And so these funds would go back to the local health departments in order to assist them in being able to bring on the additional staff that they need in specific counties in order to address the pandemic.
Well, if I could interject real quick. So yesterday we approved $350 million of the 103 counties. Could this money be used for the local health departments through the counties that was just approved yesterday?
I don't know what that money was due. We don't know the specifics of that. Is that going directly to the health departments, or is it going directly to the local governmental entities to be used as needed?
Well, it'd be my perception that the counties are the overall jurisdiction for the county health departments. And if the health departments make a request to the individual counties for the amount that we approved yesterday, they could be reimbursed instead of having it be a pass-through through KDHE.
Yeah. Continue.
Senator Gill.
Thank you. So I actually brought this up yesterday about the different functions of government between cities and counties. And health departments are under counties. And so I think one of the things that, I know you may not have this now, but it would be good for us to know moving forward, are the health departments having to hire more people in order to do this testing? Are they having to work their current employees longer hours, so they're having to pay overtime? Those kinds of things. But I think that if this $4 million is clearly to pass on to local health departments, I think we need to take a look at how are the counties going to be able to help their local health departments, and this seems like a perfect fit for that.
Senator McGinn, this is Ashley. I would like to defer to Dennis also, as he had specific conversations with the locals, and he may be able to address some of the questions that you guys have brought up regarding this request.
Is Dennis on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, Dennis Kriesel, Executive Director, Kansas Association of Local Health Departments. In terms of when we were constructed the initial ask, we conducted a financial needs survey in April with the local health departments. And I can always provide the summary of that. That was submitted to budget for their ability to review the summary data in terms of the narrative explanations along with the specific dollar requests from the health departments. We didn't have a 100% response rate, but we did have 97% of the population reflected in that data set. And as Senator McGinn was speaking about, a lot of the initial funding, 69% of the survey responses, which is now being addressed via the ELC funds, is from the disease investigation burden that is falling on the local level at this stage. For those of you that aren't familiar, Kansas Public Health is county-based. It's a decentralized system. And so departments are either relying on expanding contact tracing by working overtime on their existing staff, bringing in new staff either on contract or on as employees to do contact tracing, or trying to turn to some sort of volunteer workload. And KDHE has been a major asset in trying to help address that situation. The case in point would be some of our meatpacking counties, which have just seen a surge of case investigation that is necessary to control the spread of COVID-19 on county sizes that were never budgeted to be able to handle that volume of investigation. And it's the volume that's crushing health departments right now. That's why so much of that funding was initially oriented, almost 70%, towards on need salary and wages, but the rest of the needs are still present that we can't use the ELC funding for. And that is things like the PPE, protective equipment, the ability to be able to do COVID testing supplies is a key portion of that. Software, we're looking at some tech solutions to try not to have to actually phone every single contact that is being quarantined, for example, to follow up with them. And then any sort of contracted services that we might need, like doing COVID work group facilitation and such. So the way it seemed at the time, we only knew of one federal funding stream before this ELC money arrived, and that was $1.7 million for the local level coming from the original coronavirus supplemental. So that's why we've reduced the request by 9 million, because we now have the salary piece solved thanks to CDC. As part of the Paycheck Protection Program, this ELC funding was added in. But we're worried about being able to continue to do the rest of the aspects of the disease investigation and contact tracing under existing county budget structure. So because those budgets were already approved, and it's, as you all know, it's very difficult to make an adjustment at this point, especially because they're on the calendar year budget. So while the state fiscal year is starting in July, they're still under the existing fiscal year, which never foresaw the need to deal with COVID. But.
Well, Dennis and I would just kind of elaborate on what I was talking about before. Yesterday, when we approved the $350 million that is going to all the other counties outside of Johnson and Sedgwick, there was a discussion yesterday on whether or not these counties would be able to spend all of the dollars that is going to be received. And so I would probably contend that we could have the local health departments request this through the counties. And you specifically mentioned the meatpacking counties, basically, Finney and Ford. They're also going to be available to request additional funds through the impact fund of the $50 million based off of the number of COVID-19 cases that they have in respect to 1,000 residents, and then also to the unemployment rate. And there's been a threshold that's been set by the SPARK committee in regards to what the qualifications be in qualifying for those dollars. So I would think this is my personal opinion. I think this is something that needs to be directed from the local health departments to the counties, because a question that I posed yesterday when I was reading the resolution, it said that the money that's going to be received is going to go directly to the counties, and did not specify whether or not it would be going to any other entities within that county, namely cities or other taxing entities. But the counties are going to be responsible for these funds. And I think the local health departments could request to supplement the amount through the counties.
I understand the perspective, and I don't disagree with it. I think at the time, obviously, when we put together the request, we weren't aware of what other allocations would be available at the county level. We did try and account for it, however, in the proposal that we did submit, that KDHE, I should say, did submit. It did note that because at the time we were actually thinking more about what if the federal government steps up and actually supplies additional funding. So we did put in qualifications into the language that these amounts wouldn't just be doled out as grants. They would have to be applied for by the health departments. There would be up to values that they could request, that they are to take advantage of other funding streams first. And we included a provision as well in the proposal that anything in surplus would be returned to the state general fund. We can't just go and take this and keep it to do for some non-COVID thing just because we got extra COVID money through some other avenue that wasn't originally foreseen. So we were trying to find ways to say, our estimate attempted to be frugal and conservative, and whenever we've learned of anything new, namely ELC, we tried to subtract it out. But obviously as an entity that represents local health departments, I have concerns whether or not necessarily the local health departments will get fully what they need to do disease investigation, because this is a direct COVID response activity vis-a-vis every other competing interest that exists at the county level. That's my fear.
Understood. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just kind of like to continue the line of question that Senator McGinn was, we're kind of, I guess, down to this, to state fair. If I'm understanding the budget director, your recommendations, the yes means that it wouldn't qualify for the federal money, so you think it needs to be funded. The no means it would, and the no means it already has, and the no recommendation means that it probably could.
The recommendation of yes, no, or not recommended is not, was not a statement to whether it would comply with these CRF. That was our recommendation. Would I recommend it? Would I not recommend it? On this one, we're not recommending this one because we think they can apply for the CRF. And we were hoping you would approve what you did yesterday, knowing that was coming. A lot that was said is exactly right. It can be applied for through other means now. So just to make it simple, the first one's Department of Children and Family, yes. Department of Corrections has been removed, and we're on Department of Health and Environment. The 4 million is 21. We would not recommend it. So we think they got other options.
Right. Okay. That's awesome. So if we could go to the state fair, I would think that probably would not be able. There probably wouldn't be any federal money that would be able to on that one.
Correct. That one's a little interesting one. There were 2 driving points that drove us to recommend it. A, it clearly cannot be applied for through the CRF money. That's a reason. And then also the amount is, it's not a budget breaker, $205,000, and I didn't think anyone would want to have the state fair closed. It's truly just a revenue loss. And so if they are going to get money, if you're going to help, that's your choice. But if you are, this is probably it.
Okay.
That's the reason.
And then, I'm not sure right now, but maybe later, I saw the state fair was on there, so maybe they could address this. But if we could go on to the judiciary then. I'm sorry.
Can we stop at state
Let's go
fair?
ahead, so we are in the top of the state fair. And actually, is Robin Jennison available? See you.
Yeah, I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jennison. Can you give us a status on what the plan is for the state fair coming in September?
Yes, we are having a meeting with our board on June the 30th. We have, I will tell you that the staff is going to recommend to the board that we have a fair. We think that we can do it safely. We've got some changes that we think that we can make if needed, realizing the state fair is not till after Labor Day. That's a ways out, but we think that we can show the board the changes that we can make, and hopefully they'll be comfortable to continue to have a state fair. Previous to that June 30th meeting, we are meeting with the Reno County Health Department to kind of get their lay of the land. And after we visit with them, I thought that I would reach out to the governor's office to see if they had any input that they wanted to say before we met with our board on June the 30th.
Oh, thank you for that update. Senator McGinn.
Thank you. I was looking at the loss of revenue. There was quite an extensive list of the different things that were events that were not able to go on. That required employees to be there and the revenue that would be received. And it made me think of some of the venues around my area, all of which, most of them applied for the PPP grant. And I was wondering if you applied for the PPP grant to backfill the positions of these employees.
No, we did not. And I may have misunderstood it, but I did not think that we qualified. But I could have misunderstood that.
I mean, so you did have your attorney look into that, and I don't even know if the door's still open for PPP now or not, but it seems like you're not, other than you're a quasi-state, you're not much different than some of these other venues who had to shut down as well and apply for PPP.
Not that I know of. And I mean, we shut our stuff down, but our employees stayed working. We teleworked. We successfully teleworked. So really what we did was we were just shut down out of a public safety issue. Our venues couldn't host events. And so that's what our issue was.
I know, and I'm thinking there are lots of venues, at least in my area, that could not host events either. And they applied for PPP, and it helped pay their employees to keep their employees on. And now they're opening back up.
Yeah, well, we did not apply for that.
And Mr. Jennison, did you check with the attorneys whether or not you qualified?
No, we did not.
Any other?
May I clarify?
Yes.
Their request is on the front page, the 205 is cause of losses from commercial space rent and sponsorship dollars for the 2020 fair still have time to normalize. So this was, the request was because of revenue loss,
Right.
not PPE.
Well,
Senator,
very much the same. I get that it's lost revenue, no different than those other venues that had to shut down. They lost revenue too. They applied for the PPP. They were at least able to keep their employees. So they had that money to offset.
Question.
Senator Hawk.
Is the there are so many new acronyms. Is the PPP, did that money run out? I know there were several SBA dollars.
There was a second phase. It initially ran out rather quickly the first time. But I think the second phase of it is still available, is it not?
I can't answer that question.
That might be something, if it's still available, we might want to encourage the state fair to look into that in council, and if they could make application.
I mean, if I could just make a statement, that's what's going to happen when everyone gets audited. If they get audited and they didn't have receipts that actually bought masks, so on and so forth, and that money went to salaries, they're going to have to figure out how to justify that.
There may be ramifications.
Could be ramification. It's clearly not for revenue, pay salaries, revenue loss. If they, and I think what Mr. Jensen's saying is that they were social distancing. They didn't really have that much expense probably in actually purchasing PPE. And if he's still on, he could verify that.
That's correct.
Well, I think all of us sitting on the budget committees, obviously, we know the financial status of the Kansas State Fair. And it's been, I'll be honest, rather tight for the last few years. And so even though the amount is only about $205,000, that is a huge hit in respect to the budget for the Kansas State Fair.
That's what we thought, correct.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jennison, looking on page 18 of the budget director's memo, it's saying that you don't believe that you'll be able to make the $300,000 transfer to the State Fair Capital Improvement Fund. Are you saying that you don't believe you'll be able to make that if we didn't give this, or you don't think you're going to make it?
I don't. Thank you for the question. I don't think we'll be able to make it this fiscal year for what we should do this fiscal year, depending on how our revenues turn up. And if you look at the entire document that we sent in, we're somewhere about 140,000 behind on commercial exhibit, and our sponsorship dollars are about 210,000 short. Those are because the COVID hit our vendors and our sponsors. We didn't feel like, we brought that up simply to show how important this non-fair revenue was to our cash flow. If the board votes June the 30th to have the fair, we may be able to make part of that lost revenue back up just because people know we're going to have the fair. We're required to make a $300,000 transfer to our capital improvement fund every year. last year we did that in June. We have not done it yet. Just to give you a comparison of where we are cash flow wise, last year at the end of June, we had $828,000 between our local bank account and the state fair fee fund. This year we've got $671,000. We had already made that $300,000 payment last year. So you can see we're about 130,000 plus 300,000 cash flow wise behind where we were last year. Our payroll runs about 60,000 every 2 weeks. So it's put us in a significant kink. If we would not have the fair, we generate about 90% of our revenue from the fair. And then that 671,000 is the totality of what this fair has to kind of pick up the pieces and try to put a fair together for then FY for the 21 fair.
Well, yeah, I hope you have the fair. I really think that we should be able to have the fair. I believe in September. So I guess my question would be if we, and I may have to ask Jill this question too, if we could somehow give you the authority to not transfer that 300,000, would that help with the ability, this loss of the 210,000?
You know, I still think the 200,000 was a real loss, and we're not sure. You know, I've got the sponsorship people and our competitive or our commercial exhibits in. As we've talked, since we sent this in, sponsorship wise, just because of COVID, we lost a longtime sponsor that's not going to be able to participate in the fair this year. We also lost a brand new sponsor who was going to be a fairly significant sponsor for us that's not going to participate. So, I mean, we're going to see some lost revenue. And I think even if we do have the fair, there are going to be some people that don't feel comfortable coming to the fair. There are going to be some people that maybe some of the things that we're doing so we can make sure we have a fair, they're not going to want to come and participate. So to say that, you know, if somehow you guys said we don't have to make the $300,000 transfer, if you're suggesting that would bail us out, we wouldn't need the 200,000. I don't think that I would go that far.
Well, we can't do it anyway. I just found out from Jill, so it's a non-issue anyway. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Any other further questions for Ms. Jennison in regards to State Fair? Okay, I'll move on to Representative Wolf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a more general question, I think, and I could use the health department, for example. So we're saying that if money could be covered federally, I mean, if costs could be covered federally, we'd use that money. We wouldn't use it here. The money that, this 50 million that we appropriated, though, doesn't have as many restrictions as the federal money on it. So I was wondering if that's another lens we need to look through. For example, the gentleman that represents the health department, are there things that federal money won't cover that they then could use less restricted money? I'm not necessarily allocating to do it, but I think that's another little slice that we have to think about in terms of this money, because that money is pretty restrictive. The perfect example is employee of the health department, salaries already budgeted. They could have spent 100% of their time the last 4 months on COVID, but you can't recoup that money, obviously, because that salary is already in the budget. So that's just an example, but have you thought about that? And maybe I'll address this partly to if the gentleman from the Association of the Health Departments is still on, if he has any response to that.
Dennis, are you available?
I am available. Sorry, I was on mute. I had to demutify myself. Yeah, in terms of like the ELC funding that we discussed, the 9 million that was used to reduce this this LCC request, that is restricted to just the salaries and wages. And the reason for that is based off of what the language was in the ELC under PPP, that we knew that was our KDHE knew that was a safe use for those funds at the local level. So that's why it didn't cover things like doing the PPE equipment, or if you needed software to help with some other aspects. I'm not saying that it was all prohibited. We knew the salaries were safe though. So that's where that came from. On the flip side, though, I'm not familiar with what the restrictions might be on the $400 million for the health-related expenses that were discussed earlier that was approved by the State Finance Council yesterday. So I can't say that that funding wouldn't be able to meet some of these same needs in the 4.1 million, which I think is what the director was specifying earlier. I haven't read the write-up on it yet. So obviously it just happened yesterday. We submitted this request before that. So that's sort of that's why I can't be as clear as I wish I could be.
Okay, thank you. And I think the budget director was going to find also, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
That's fine. First, going through these items and the conversation we've been having, can you go through the items? When we appropriated this money, actually, when Senator McGinn and I were in the meeting with the governor, where she had initially asked for the $50 million for COVID-19 response, can you go through the items on here that are actually COVID-19 related and not just a agency request? I mean, because if you look at the top one, I mean, it says is additional funding not adopted by the 2020 legislature. So is there a correlation between COVID-19 and this request? Can you go through each of the items and say, based off of the analysis that the Office of Budget has done, is there a correlation directly to COVID-19? Or is it just a request being made because it was not approved by the 2020 legislature?
We view this fund, this $50 million emergency money, as having much, it does not have the strings attached or the limitations or the guidance, the tight guidance that the federal money has. So, for example, yes, the first one, back to Department of Children and Family, we're only here because that was a GBA 1, and the 50, it seems like a good place to get that. I mean, maybe one of the only places to get it. It's not CRF. We haven't talked today about the many other complications to this. If you had it in your budget, you can't supplant it. So those types of things, or if it's I mean, the federal money is tightly guided as far as what you can use it for and not use it for. The 50 million, it has, I guess, no really restrictions. It's up to you all.
Well,
if it's an emergency, it's an emergency.
And I would say it's an emergency contingency fund.
Right.
In regards to COVID-19, and that's the whole reason why we put this into the budget. Right. It was not a slush fund to use because something was not approved in the budget by the 2020 legislature.
You know, every single one of these, I guess you could tie to COVID. Like, for example, back on children and family, the 11.6 is driven. The need is even more important because of COVID. I don't know that it's a direct connection, but that was in our GBA. It didn't get enacted, so we felt they applied for it. And once again, we didn't encourage or discourage anybody to apply. And there were no guidelines as far as limitations. So when y'all approved the money, we threw an app on and decided, let's just get it in your hands as soon as possible.
Well, again, and we need to also answer Representative Wolfmore's question. But again, the money that we put aside, and when we had the meeting with the governor, was supposed to be for COVID-19 directly related items. And so can you go through each of these and correlate that relationship to COVID-19?
Well, I mean, because, I guess because of COVID-19 and the early, the way the session ended, they didn't get their caseloads. So these services will stop if they don't get this money. This was in GBA 1, which is sort of the normal, GBA 1 was, we supplied you all, which is sort of your customary caseload adjustments and that kind of thing. I guess, and these are for services out to the foster care and so on and so forth. I'm not sure if I can answer it on that one. The Department of Corrections was clearly COVID caused, and that increased. That was clear. Department and KDHE, those go directly to health organizations. That would be COVID direct. State fair was a little different. It's COVID related because of loss of revenue. So there's a reason we can come in for the emergency money, but you can't go for the CRF. Judiciary branch, we just kind of pass that through to you. They have other options, so we're not recommending that one. Kansas Highway Patrol, the first item, the 520, they have other options, we believe. I'm sorry, the $1 million on Highway Patrol, we think they have other options. It's COVID related, but they have other options. We're not recommending that. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I don't know that it is directly COVID related, and I have to understand that term, I guess. Some are clearly, some folks are spending extra money. The Department of Corrections they had 86 people test positive, or 95 or something. So they were having a real struggle getting guards, and that was extra because of COVID directly. I could maybe go through one I'll try to answer that as we go through these one at a time as we're doing, or.
Well, I mean, you kind of went through half of them already, so I would just continue with the other half.
Okay.
On what the COVID-19 correlation is to the request.
Well, and I don't want to shortchange the agencies having the chance to make the pitch.
And they're available.
Okay. Well, on KBI, for example, I'm on the first one, the 520. We think they have other options on that 520, so we're not recommending that. The next KBI though is pretty interesting. That's the APHIS system. That was going to be in a GBA 2, and everyone has for years known we have to do this. This is coming at us, and it has to be done. Emergency funds is a potential, but that's why they applied. I can't say, they had the ability to apply. On that one was tough. That's, to me, not necessarily directly related to COVID. I mean, we'd known we needed that system. It wasn't in the budget, so it applies, but not for the CRF necessarily. But it definitely could come out of this fund, and that's all your choice. The VA is a dire need. That is a cash flow need. That was in a budget amendment that wasn't considered. So we had them money for cash flow in 2020. They really have to have it. And that one we're recommending. And Department of Commerce, what happened in the last one, I guess, or no, the second to last, Department of Commerce, we're recommending 25 million. They revised their request. That's a judgment call too. The only reason we did is because economy is becoming more and more priority. That's what everyone is worried about. So we recommend that 25 million. And then as far as regions, we'll let them speak for themselves, but they got gear money. They got 26 yesterday. We're trying to hold them harmless. But they can too apply for the CRF. And in addition to the money that they already got, the 104 million, I think was mentioned earlier, directly, they got $1.9 million from yesterday's action. So with that, we're not recommending the regions request. And those are our recommendations.
Okay, so out of all these recommendations, and we'll get back to Representative Wolford's question. So out of all of these requests, I'm only seeing maybe 2 that may not qualify for CARES Act money?
Fairs, for example, correct? The fairs wouldn't comply for sure.
The what?
The state fair would not, you're correct on the state fair. If I can be so bold, the four we had was DCF 11.6, fairs 0.2, 200,000, VA 830, and then 25 for commerce. And if you all did that, that's 37.6, and we would be able to capture and help us. It would just help us. We would lapse the remaining 12.4 or $15 million.
Representative Wolford, do you want to state your question?
We got lost back in all of that, but so on the very first one, Department of Children and Families, this money, this $50 million is restricted. If we don't use it for that, how much federal money will we lose? If we don't use that 11.6, what will we lose federally?
I have folks listening in on Zoom and I'm getting help. So hopefully I can't answer that right here. Hopefully I'll get an answer before we end. And you're talking about all funds that would, the chance of losing other money if we don't do the case law.
So, and I see this fund as, it doesn't have to be as strict in this case as that we would with federal money, obviously.
Correct.
That this was sort of this Department of Children and Families, although it's not COVID supplies, it was a casualty of the virus from leaving early.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Senator Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you've answered my question several times, it looks to me like you did a good job explaining that the ones that we weren't able to come back and do all of this, like the first one, is just money we need to put in there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my understanding is the 11.6 million, they're not being able to pay the extra right now to the foster system because they don't have that. So I think that's probably a given that we really gotta get that on board. Just going back to the state fair, and you might know, but I could also ask Robin. So if I'm understanding right, they're saying that they're not gonna probably pay the 300,000. I was looking under page 19. They're probably not gonna pay the 300,000 no matter what, which is not, I understand that, that's fine. If we don't give them the 205, are they going to have enough to get through the fiscal year?
And that's where we come in and looking at their funds, that's where our analysts come in. And it is our opinion, no, they need the 205 to get through the year.
To get through to July.
It's a cash, as Mr. Jennison said, some of these are cash flow, like VA, it's a cash flow need. They really need that. And they're moving stuff, trying. Behind the scenes, what's going on, our folks are doing everything they can for cash flow.
Right, okay. And then on the fingerprint, we didn't put that in the budget, or was that an omnibus? Because I know that came up, that came up in our interim IT committee, that they were gonna ask for that. I thought it was 8 million, but I think they had not decided how much exactly at that time, how much it was gonna be.
Which is why we didn't have the number.
Okay.
You're all over it. We've seen it coming. We said, you've got to get a good number. I mean, it started out, I believe the number started out 13. They've been getting better numbers and refining what they need. And that is exactly correct. We knew we had to do it. We had to do it, but we had to have some real numbers to go on. They have those numbers now.
So
and that would have been in GBA too.
Number.
That would have been in GBA
right,
too.
Okay. I think, yeah. And that is, they really need that done before the end of fiscal 21. Is that my understanding? And I think, Mr. Chairman, I do believe that, for KPIs on there, that my understanding in the IT committee that we had last summer, that they really need that started at least before the end of fiscal year 21.
I would prefer to have, that they answer it, but I think they've also got some, there's always, can you slip it over into another year? And they've been working hard on figuring out how to do that. But, it's an actual, definitely real need. Would it need to come out of the emergency money? I'm not so sure about that.
Okay, so maybe, Mr. Chairman, if we could ask.
The director of KDI.
Yes.
Director Thompson, there you are. Okay.
Good morning, members of the committee. I'm struggling a little bit to hear some of the questions from the panel, but I will do my best.
Well, what I want to know, this was probably going to be a GBA. I know we talked about this in the Joint IT Committee in last year about this time, I guess it was. If we don't approve this and you have to wait till 2022, or when we come back in January, we could do something, I guess, if we don't do something now. Do you have to have it in 2021, by the end of 2021, or is the system still okay that you could wait? I guess that's my question.
Okay, in simplest terms, I would put it this way. The vendor for that particular system will end any support to that system. And could the system continue to work? Yes, it could. We don't believe that that's a risk that the state should really assume. If we are unsuccessful in beginning the funding process, going out and actually issuing a contract within the next couple of 3 months, we are going to have to work out an agreement with that company to, in essence, build a system in their environment that will allow us to keep moving, and we'd be behind between 14 to 16 months, and we will have to be back before the legislature in January with the same request. It was our hope that we wouldn't have to do that and expend any of those additional monies and be able to assume the first 2 years of this project as we had hoped would happen if the legislature could have stayed in session and would have been able to hear the presentations and hear the request for that amount of dollars. Hopefully that answers.
That's what you said. So you said that the vendor will stop at the end of fiscal year 21 or 20?
The vendor maintenance will end for the system in FY22. It's a very large, complex system. So right now there is an RFP ready to go. With the RFP, we would hope to sign a contract within the next couple of months. And that would keep us on track to have a new system in place by the end of FY 2022, when the maintenance and support for our current system would go away.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know it's 6.5 or 6.8 million, but this fingerprint system is used by every law enforcement agency in the state. I mean, we've got to make sure that it stays up. And I mean, whether we do it now or whether we wait till January, we are going to have to spend that $6.8 million. So I would almost say that, in my opinion, that's something that we probably need to go ahead and get started. We probably would have done it if we would have stayed here. So that's my opinion on that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Meehan.
I think I already talked to I'm prepared. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and then if everybody's done, we'll go through this. But there's a couple of items that we have not talked about, so I'm not on the KPI right now. I wanted to make a comment about the nursing facilities. because of a phone call I received last week, and I'm sorry I did not get there to pick up my show and tell. You may have received maybe from your congressional leaders that how much PPE they have delivered to the state. And again, I should have picked up my props, but I talked to one of the directors in my area, and they basically said the PPE consists of the robes or the gowns, are trash bags with a hole cut out, and you have to cut the arms out depending on where your arms are. The masks, the non N95 masks, they actually came from Hanes. They are very thin and no protection. And again, I am going to pick up my props for another day, but I wanted to bring that up because it sounds to me like, and this individual had been on other boards, different hospital boards and other conversations, and they are very concerned about an outbreak. They do not feel like the FEMA money or the FEMA product that was sent to them will protect their individuals. And so I would hope that when we get down to deciding some of this, that we could perhaps maybe approve half of the money for KDADs, particularly to cover that PPE that the staff needs. So that's just one thought. The other thought I wanted to share of another area that we haven't really talked about much, and again, I don't know if this is the correct fund, but I think we need to be very aware of some of the things that are happening. Our job creation fund is zero. It's my understanding. And it's also my understanding we are receiving a lot of calls to come to Kansas. And if you think about it, and I do not know any of the individual entities, but my mind went to why would you come to Kansas? Think about what has happened. Think about those large urban areas and the outbreaks that they have had because of COVID. We have been somewhat blessed in the fact that we are concentrating on some different little cluster areas, and we're so far kind of staying on top of it. And then the other has to do with the riots that are occurring. Many of them are peaceful, but they are happening in mass gatherings in large communities. And I can foresee that there are companies that can look at Kansas today and say, we would like to bring our business to Kansas. So I just think we need to be aware as we're so deep into the COVID, the PPE, the Department of Labor, all these holes that we have to fill. Those communities that come out of these crises are those communities that invest during a time of crisis. And so I just want to let all of you, again, I'm not advocating we pass this today, but I think we need to be aware that I believe there are companies that would like to come to Kansas because we're just a little bit more settled down than the rest of the country and stable. So thank you for letting me just share that, Mr. Chairman, because I know there were some areas that we haven't talked about yet. And however way you want to go through these, I've at least shared those items that I felt were important. Thank you.
Well, and I think Secretary Tolan is on need to, I think, leave for a meeting at noon. But if I remember right, I think in one of our previous meetings, you had mentioned that there has been a dramatic increase in the amount of companies that have been looking at relocating to Kansas compared to last year. Can you elaborate on that? And maybe from the comments that Senator McGinn said, that's a particular reason as to why they're looking at the state of Kansas.
Good, Chair. Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to testify in front of the committee. On to Senator McGinn's point about what we're seeing in terms of trends with companies that are seeking locations. Our deal flow is triple what we were at the same time last year. So just as an example, between March 1st and May 1st of last year, we opened 13 new economic development projects, and we define a project, it's like a lead. During the same period this year, we opened 37 new economic development projects. Now, some of this is about the fact that we've rebuilt the state's business recruitment team around the country. And that's been key to increasing the number of opportunities the state has to get new companies. But it's also because the companies that are expanding right now have a good alignment with where Kansas is strong. So what we're talking about is companies that are engaged in logistics, e-commerce, medical supplies, producing PPE. And these are all areas where Kansas has a competitive advantage. And so as an example, right now we have a massive distribution center that would employ 1,800 people. They're down to 2 states, Kansas and Missouri. And we are in the last about 4 weeks of this competition. And what we need in this environment is cash to be able to close this deal. What companies are seeking right now, just because of the uncertain fiscal environment nationally, is cash. And so that's what it requires in order for us to be competitive. But we have more opportunities now than we've had in certainly most of the last probably decade. And I want to make sure that we're capitalizing on these opportunities so that we can address a 13% unemployment rate in the state. We've got to get people back to work. And the way to do that is to seize on opportunities.
So in your request for 2020, you have $37 million for the job creation fund. We have about 2 weeks left in 2020. 18 million in 2021. And we also have the possibility of, see if there's any correlation to COVID-19 and use CARES money. Maybe, I don't know, I'm talking about that, maybe we can. So what would be the dollar amount that you need, Secretary, to finalize these deals for 2020?
So the job creation fund is intended to be the state's war chest that where the dollars carry over. So what we've done in our request, it was originally 37 million. We've revised that downward to 25 million. And at the moment, we've got $18 million in commitments on our existing funds, which if these come through, we will have entirely depleted the job creation fund. So this $25 million will enable us to close a number of projects that are right now in the pipeline, ready to go, as well as to be ready to capitalize on other opportunities that are continuing to come as the COVID situation evolves and the like. On the question about federal dollars in the CARES Act, these type of economic development projects are not eligible to be funded under the CARES Act. So that's why we're standing in front of you today with this request.
Now, that's why I changed the direction of my question. I sort of went out that pathway. Because in the meetings that we've had, I kind of figured out, well, that's why I can't do that. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Campbell, on the very first one, I'm sure families, why is there not a FMAP or federal match on that? I look further back here is actually subtracting some federal funds, 2.3 million. What our foster care is FMAP. So why is there not FMAP associated with that 11.6 million?
I will not be able to answer that question. I don't know that, but I got the answer to the earlier question. There is no match. They don't lose anything if you don't do this. They just don't pay, they can't pay the bills for foster care without this. That because it was a consensus caseload adjustment. I don't know why I can't answer your question specifically, but the previous question, you don't lose any match. There isn't, but they just can't pay their foster care bills without this money.
And I agree, but if you look back at KS, which is a similar situation, there's a match here. All funds match.
$7.7 million, and then there's also the all funds is going unpaid, so I'm just curious whether that there isn't.
Amy can respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take a stab at answering your question. So the funding mechanisms are slightly different between those two social service programs. So under KDAS, that's Medicaid, so that's a straight match. So it's a % state and a % federal. Foster care funding is structured slightly differently. The majority of that funding is state monies. There are some federal dollars available if the child is eligible for those federal programs. It's not a straight match rate. So it's not necessarily that FMAP. My recollection off the top of my head is the additional FMAP for the entire foster care program was less than $1 million for the entire program, not just the increase they were asking for. So that's why you see that very small difference between the SGF and the all funds for DCF. But I believe DCF is available if you have more detailed questions.
So why would we have a minus $2.3 million here in federal funds?
I would defer to DCF, they're on the call, but I just want to make clear that it's not the same type of state and federal match.
Dan, you're on call.
This is Dan Levine, CFO at DCF. And we do have the FMAP figured in there. That's why the difference between the GF ask and the all funds amount is in there. And that was all adjusted at the last consensus caseload meeting to true up all the funding between the available federal funds.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator McGinn, part of my questions are on the commerce. I want to make sure I have this correctly because of Representative Waymaster's question. It shows you have a current balance of 16.7 million, commitments of 18.5, so you're short about 1.9 for the current year, which ends in 2 weeks. So are we wanting, you said you changed the 37 to 25 and then 18, so are we actually talking about the combined total? Is that what the request is?
So, Senator, at this time, we are we have commitments out in terms of incentive offers that total 18 million. We've got a cash balance of 16 million. If 100% of those offers were to be accepted, then we have a shortfall there that would be immediate. What we're talking about, though, with this $25 million request is the resources that we need to be able to address opportunities that are here right now, that are coming over the summer, that we know are coming down the line and where we haven't made incentive offers yet. So we're essentially not able to make any further incentive offers using JCF at this time because of where we are on our cash balance. So I'm concerned that as a state, we're missing opportunities at a time where, you know, as I mentioned before, we're really ripe to get some good companies because of the combination of our location in the middle of the country, our infrastructure, workforce. You know, this is the first time in a long time where we have the workforce that we need in order to support companies' hiring demands. And so the stars are aligned on everything except our ability to provide the cash that companies are looking for right now.
And I understand that, and I see where one day had 22,000 new jobs, which is very important. And that's not really my question. My question is how many total dollars are we talking here? I mean, we changed the 37 to 25, and then you wanted 18 for 25. So are we talking 43 million, or I'm trying to figure out the total here.
So the total that we're requesting is $25 million. in the job creation fund right now, there is a cash balance of 16. We have made incentive offers of 18. And so the 25 is the request itself.
We're talking for us 25, then we're not looking at the 18. That clarifies that, and I do think it's important to add these 22,000 jobs, and I think the investment of $3.7 billion to retain another 1,000 jobs is very important. And I don't disagree with the amounts. I just wanted to clarify so we knew the exact amounts. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senator.
Well, and Secretary Cohen, going off of Senator Bellinger's question, would it be prudent to go ahead and backfill the amount of requests that we currently have above the balance for 2020, and then have you come back to this committee in fiscal year 2021 on the amount of dollars that are potentially exposed on the offers that are made out to particular companies moving to Kansas, instead of just the blanket 25 million?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it would be prudent to do that. The reason is that we're not making any additional incentive offers because we are completely subscribed with the JCF as it exists. And so we have projects that come, they often come quickly. We need to be able to.
Because we have a limited amount of funds, and the 25 million is half of it.
Right. Our position would be that we need these dollars now so that we can respond now and through the summer to get projects brought over the line, bring these jobs to Kansas, get people back to work. The ultimate determination on whether that's the right timing rests with you. I can only give my recommendation as an economic development professional and as head of this agency. This is what we need to close these economic development deals, both what we know and what we expect will be coming.
But when will you know in fiscal year 2021 that we'll be able to close these economic development deals?
I apologize. The audio isn't great. Would you please repeat the question, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, so you have these deals of $18 million out there right now. We can backfill that. But for fiscal year 2021, when is the time frame that you're going to be closing these deals?
Well, it's an ongoing process. So we'll have opportunities that come in July, August, and on through the year. We don't know precisely when a company will reach out or when we will find a company that is seeking a site in a place like Kansas. So what we need to have is the resources so that we're nimble, we're flexible, we're ready to go. We can
just had a request by the KBI saying that the service contract is going to be ending quite soon in regards to the fingerprinting device that we're using for all the law enforcement across the state of Kansas. We have to leverage these funds. And when the request is half of the funds that's in the COVID-19 emergency dollars, it's going to come under a little bit of scrutiny.
Certainly. And to your point about leverage, though, if you look at the return on investment that JCF has brought to the state, LPA found it's for every dollar of JCF that's spent, there is a $39 private sector return. And so, there is no greater leverage factor that I can point to than that. So that I can't speak to the merits of fingerprinting or anything like that. I can only speak from an economic development perspective and talk about leverage. And I'm really, I think 39-1 is good numbers.
And so is public safety. Representative Wolford.
I don't remember. I had a question. I wanted to go back to the, if you want to continue on this, I want to go back to the KDADs. If there's more questions on this, So following up on Senator McGinn's question, so I have no problem with the amount for the long-term care facilities when they've been hit too hard. What I was wondering though is that some of the things that are listed would be clear CARES Act money that they could get reimbursed for PPE, sanitation supplies, and additional staffing even so. So if we approve that, I guess I just want to make sure that we don't forget about them in the CARES Act money, because some of this could be directly covered by CARES Act money. Then they'd be free to use some of that for additional needs that they have because they did get hit so hard. Thank you.
So,
Senator McGinn.
so why isn't this request in the other CARES?
We're back on DCF.
No, we're on KDAD.
KDADs.
I mean, and they're looking at their description, and it sounds like it perfectly identifies the CARES Act.
And that's exactly why we're not recommending approval, because it can be CFO. I'm sorry, it took me a little bit, and yeah. And may I say, maybe a disconnect was on June the 17th, Commerce sent a letter that was just passed out that explained they're taking it to 25 million. So that's what we just got handed out, I think. Thank you, Amy.
Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have similar concerns that Senator McGinn mentioned on KDAD. I think I saw a newscast last night, and I've heard from some nursing home administrators that they really have been at the end of the line. And I think we have a crisis that is brewing if these nursing homes go out of business. And that's our hardest hit area in terms of fatalities, in terms of people who contract COVID-19. So I want to be careful that we don't respond to that as quickly as we can, whether it's with Spark money or this money. But I don't want to have a big debate for several months and then have the fatality rate jump up or have nursing homes collapse financially. And so I'm concerned about that. And then as I look at the money, are we leveraging Medicaid money if we put $7 million in general fund money? Is that a leverage of 21 million, or is that just another 14 million that we leverage?
And you're still on KDAD?
Yeah, on that page 52 application, I was reading that closely, but I'm a little confused about the all funds. Does that draw down the federal Medicaid funds if we put that money in there?
And if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll let them answer that. I'll better let
And
them
I'll
answer.
have another follow-up. If we found that money, CARES money, would that also draw down Medicaid money or not? Two parts to
I
that.
better let them answer that. So just like earlier, nursing and some of those, I'm not the expert on those. While we're maybe at hold here to get that answer, what you all did in Senate Bill 66, you gave them 6.6 million more in all funds. So you did help, and also, which equated to 2.7 million SGF, a 1% bond. So you did help in Senate Bill 66. And because it can be applied for, this can go to CRF, that's why we're not recommending it. To answer your question on drawdown, I will wait. I'll let the agency answer that.
Representative Carter.
Yeah, let the agency answer my question.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
I draw down, I bet you Representative Carpenter has the same question. But I'd like to hear what the agency says about drawdown.
This is Brad Ridley with KDADS. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I think, and I had trouble hearing the question, but I think the question was about the specific request that we had for nursing facilities related to COVID. We had an all funds amount of about 23 to 24 million. Of that, because of FMAP and the Medicaid share, 8.6 million of that would be state funded. The rest would be Medicaid funded.
And, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, my follow-up question, then, if you can hear me, is if we were able to use the CARES funds through the SPARK committee, would we still be able to draw down those Medicaid funds? So your request has 7.7 million. I heard you say 8.6.
Yeah, and so I don't know a whole lot about the CARES Act relief funds and what the parameters are, but my understanding is since that's all federal money, that we would not be able to use federal money to match other federal money. So my understanding, and I probably need, I don't know, Larry or somebody else to verify this, but my understanding, if it were CARES money, it would potentially need to cover the entire all funds amount.
And I know that they've gone back and forth for the match. And at one time it was clearly no, and that was what was said out of Washington was, well, you shouldn't use federal money to match federal money. I think they've actually maybe loosened that up. So let me get you a specific answer. I don't know specifically. But that's one of those deals that guidance has been kind of both ways.
Well, and so we need some clarification on that, whether or not the money received by the federal government can be used to match, or if it can't, what Senator McGinn and I were actually talking about is that this possibly could be discussed with the State Finance Council. Because remember, also in the budget bill, not only do we have the $50 million here that we then submit our recommendations to the Legislative Coordinating Council, we also have $17.5 million that was approved in the budget that is approved by the State Finance Council in regards to COVID-19. So if we get more information on that, whether or not the federal dollars can be used to draw down additional federal dollars, this could possibly be put on the agenda with the State Finance Council if the governor chooses to put it on the agenda.
A couple responses to what you just said. I want to be clear, the money that was reimbursed or approved yesterday to go back to agencies, maybe I just assume everybody's, let me back up. Even before we received the money, the CARES Act money, we knew we needed to code and account for every penny spent COVID related. And so even before guidance came out, before money was received, we set up a code in every agency and said, start coding anything that is above and beyond, unexpected, COVID related. And that's what that list was yesterday. And just so you know, I got kind of concerned about that too. We checked, there wasn't any money that was reimbursed yesterday that's a part of this. So it's not, there's no crossover. Number one, that was money they had actually spent to date. And that was the run that we gave to the State Finance Council yesterday. And as I said, I assume a couple more times during this process, we'll say, okay, now give us a run from yesterday to August 1st, and we'll come back. And again, those are reimbursements of actual spends. On the match, here's why I'm being careful. FEMA said, no, you can't use it to match. A few days later, Donald Trump said you can. So what happens is a few days from now, probably we'll get guidance that says you can.
I think we need additional guidance on exactly what can happen.
Yeah. Well,
Just for having discrepancies from all factions of the federal government.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair? Can I follow up the last comment?
First, Representative Carpenter, did you have a question?
I'm not in any hurry, I'll be here all day.
Senator Hawk.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a strong point. I think these are all questions we need to get answered. But I think our nursing homes are really time sensitive. And I hope if we have to have another meeting with this committee, or if we have to push the spark, if we find out we have those answers, we can get the match. But if we find out we can't, it almost seems like 6 of one, half dozen of the other in a way. If we can draw down that 21 million or whatever that percentage match is of that, we don't want to miss that opportunity knowing we have that need in our nursing home. So I don't want to take 2 or 3 months to get an answer to that when I think they probably need that assistance and need to know they can count on it, certainly over the next 30 to 60 days.
Well, and I don't know exactly what the schedule is going to be because we have not received the number of meetings that the Joint Legislative Budget Committee is going to be having for the remainder of the calendar year, because the Legislative Coordinating Council has not met yet to give us those dates. But in the conversation with Senator McGinn this morning, at the beginning of the meeting, I think you're requesting 15 days for us to meet. Whether or not they approve that or not, we don't know, but that's definitely a lot more meeting days than we have ever asked for, given the situation that we're in for this particular pandemic. So we would probably have more meetings than usual to address some of these issues by the departments and the money that's sitting there in the budget that we passed in March. Senator Milligan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Means we have KDADs on here. I'd like to just follow up on Senator McGinn's talk a little earlier about protective equipment. Where are you guys at with this protective equipment? I mean, it sounds to me like this is ridiculous that we would have someone with a trash bag that holes in it. Well, but we should be able to provide them proper safety equipment.
That's what this time is for.
So this is Brad Ridley at KDAD. So I think the question was around providing PPE to nursing facilities. And we have been working since the pandemic started very closely with the Department of Emergency Management, who have processes in place for that through the local counties. So we've been working very closely with them since the most recent bill has passed regarding PPE. We have had some coordinating meetings with both the Department of Emergency Management as well as Department of Administration to make sure we have processes in place to get this PPE that the state does have ability to get out the door, that we get that to the nursing facilities. So we're working with KDEM on existing processes and seeing if we can enhance those a bit to make sure this PPE gets to where it needs to be.
This money is not being recommended. And I guess my question is, if we're not going to give you additional funds, is this going to impede the possibility of getting the proper equipment?
I think part of what the specific request we have here for nursing facilities, this is to get funding to nursing facilities to help cover those costs they are incurring and have already incurred on their own for PPE and additional staffing hours and staffing time. So our request that's on the list today is specific to getting money to nursing facilities as soon as possible to help with their additional costs related to COVID. At the same time, we are working with other state agencies, as mentioned, to make sure that the process is in place for getting PPE out to hospitals and long-term care and nursing facilities are working like they need to be to get PPE in events where they don't have enough where they need to. So there's kind of two separate pieces there.
Thank you.
Representative Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Campbell, what is the timeline for disbursement of this CARES money? For instance, it seems to me like it doesn't really matter. We can either ask for the whole ask here of CARES money, 21 million, 23 million, whatever it is. Or if they'll match it, we can ask for, we can use the 7 or whatever. So that, but I do agree that our nursing homes are in a tough position right now. I've had numerous conversations with ones in my areas, and they've taken the brunt of this. But what is the time frame for disbursement of CARES money?
And CARES has been used interchangeably. You mean the federal, the spark?
Correct.
Okay. Again, it goes back and forth, but we don't know definitively. Is it cash out the door by December 30th, or is it encumbered? And that is another thing that's still back and forth. So December 30th, very close.
But I'm talking about what is our time frame to get those folks that money out. How soon can you cut a check? Because I don't care about December or anything like that. I'm talking about, can you cut a check this week?
And I would not be the one to definitively answer. I'm going off of what was presented yesterday. That would be phase 2, phase 3, I guess, that was talked about yesterday. And there was recommendation, or there was thought of phase 2 would be by September 15th, phase 3, but those dates they're looking at moving those dates up. So that would be a spark, and that'd be an executive director's question, the steering committee, then state finance council question. In other words, that's the recovery office can tell you that. I can't, that's not a budget. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I think time is of the essence, no doubt.
Absolutely.
These folks can use this money tomorrow or yesterday, actually. So that would be my question, is how fast it would be. Okay, thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
and to try to answer that question, I was turning to Jill to make sure that I have the information correct, given the meeting that we had with Spark and then also the meeting we had yesterday. The first round was the 400 million that we approved for the local form of government or counties, and then also the impact fund. And that was slated to be in June, which obviously we met that timeline. Then, as Director Campbell mentioned, round 2, anywhere from $310 to $525 million is to be decided by September. There was discussion yesterday of moving that up to August as opposed to September due to the time frame and the time constraints that we're in. And then round 3 could be anywhere from $109 million to $324 million, and that would be tentatively right now around October. However, just depending on what the discussion and the approval is by the Spark steering committee and the executive committee, is subject to approval by the state finance council. So that is up to the discretion of whenever those decisions are made and whenever the governor wants to call the state finance council meeting to review those items. But as Director Campbell said, it's fluid right now because there was a lengthy discussion on trying to move that up so we can get these dollars out, because we do have until December 30th to spend the CARES Act money. If the money is not allocated by December 30th, that has to be sent back to the federal government. So we have a very short window of trying to identify what that money can be used and allocated for. That, Bill? Okay. Representative Carter.
And I appreciate that, clarification on that. So, but if we did spend this out of our budget, we could not use that to supplant the money. So, exactly.
That we cannot use.
If we paid this out of our 50 million, we could not reimburse ourselves.
We cannot.
Exactly. So.
That's why we were having the discussion, could these items be paid out of the CARES Act or the Mother Fund, as Director Campbell refers to that, through the Spark Committee, as opposed to the 50 million, because technically we cannot backfill related items into the state general fund. So if they can be spent with the money from the federal government, that probably be the judicious way of doing it. as opposed to the state budget, because we cannot reimburse ourselves back.
It would be, it would be, except for it's just time. I mean, those folks need that money. Yeah.
Time is always of the essence. Representative Wolfmore.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. You mentioned, I understand the 50 million, you mentioned the two questions. So you mentioned 17 million. What is, would you remind me what that is?
The 17.5 million, remember when we were in conference committee, that was the money that was allocated for Medicaid expansion, and then we had made a stipulation that Medicaid expansion had not passed during the 2020 legislative session. Then those dollars would be delegated to the State Finance Council for COVID-19.
So we're done with the, so we're, just to clarify, we're done with that session. So that money goes to COVID automatically now? Is that what?
It's delegated to the State Finance Council to appropriate the funds. I would say the intent was for COVID-19, but as they see fit.
And then my second question is, Director Campbell, I thought I heard you say, but I want to make sure that you thought there was a possibility that we could use federal money to make our federal maps we could reimburse. Is that what you said?
That is undefined, that has not definitively been answered. No, just the opposite. It's just not been definitively answered whether you can use that as a match or not.
That would open up a lot.
Yes.
So if we hope to get, we just don't know if we can answer on that or not at the time.
And as I said, FEMA, I think, FEMA said no.
Right, that's what I was operating under.
And then President Trump said yes. And so we expect to get guidance following that says yes. That's kind of how it's been working. But as of today, definitively, I don't think that has been answered.
Okay, then would you let us know that if you do get follow-up guidance on that? I think that'd be
And my team is going, no. If that would change, I would get the word out. Yes.
Thank you very much.
I just made an announcement for all the committee members and those listening and on Zoom. Given the conversation that we're having, we're going to go ahead and just work right through lunch. So we don't stop the momentum that's moving forward, and hopefully we can come up with a recommendation to adjourn and be free to go home. Senator Hawk.
Just a thought, recognize that I've been in trouble with every auditor that's ever helped me, both personally and professionally. But a thought, could we recommend on this KDET, because I think we all recognize how timely it is to get this out to our nursing homes, could we recommend to the executive committee of SPARK that they allocate money before their August or September deadline? And if they don't do that, then we have a backfill that we would allocate this money out of our $50 million emergency fund.
Well,
I mean, I'm throwing that out as a possible thought. So again, we don't spend 3 months waiting until we get an answer from the SPARK. And apparently the executive committee has authority to make some recommendations and has taken that authority, subject to State Finance Council approval. I throw that out for us to think about as a way that we could at least move that ball forward. And if we couldn't get that sold, then we wouldn't lose the Medicaid match on the all funds.
I would probably contend that, I mean, there's no binding agreement between the Joint Legislative Budget Committee and the SPARK Executive Committee. Obviously, not in legislation, because SPARK Committee was created after the fact that we passed the budget. We could probably make a statement to the Executive Committee, and the next time that the steering committee is meeting is on the 22nd, correct? Monday.
We have a meeting set.
I haven't had any confirmation that was the discussion when we left the meeting. So we can make a recommendation to the executive committee. I don't know if they're meeting on the 22nd, and whether or not they are. They're not. So you'd be coming into a time frame of having a statement to the executive committee, having them deciding on how to move forward on that particular action. And then the next time the governor calls a state finance council meeting to discuss any of the recommendations from the SPARK committees. Now, I know yesterday the governor had indicated that we were going to be meeting, and we have to meet before the beginning of the next fiscal year, because we have to pay off the certificate of indebtedness. But as far as what that date is, I don't know. So we will be having a state finance council meeting before July 1, but I don't know what that date's going to be. Senator again.
Yeah, this, so if you're talking about Spark, it's, I had heard that we possibly are not meeting on Monday, because we haven't received anything, and there's no, and then State Finance Council, we're meeting, didn't we understand that we have to meet before July 1? So we're meeting again, which, depending on what we do with this green sheet today, I think that we could make some recommendations to the governor's office to be on the agenda for state finance.
We could do that. Make a recommendation or a statement to the governor's office directly. Because as mentioned before, we had that $17.5 million that was not spent on Medicaid expansion allocated to the state finance council that they could delegate that money to be spent. Let's see who's next. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, the 21 million, 1.4 million in fiscal 20 is the match. Or part of that is what we're saying, that's the match from feds. Medicare match, is that, or Medicaid?
Again, on KDEDs.
KDEDs.
That would be, yeah, according to the, right, correct. 21, 7.7 gets you.
So either way, I mean, if we just say, well, couldn't this Spark just take 21 million out of the CARES and fund it, and it's all federal money anyway?
And again, I'm hearing that 99% sure we cannot use CRF to match.
No, I'm not talking about matching. I'm just saying, if this is something that needs to be paid now, then can't Spark just do 21 million out of their resources and just pay it?
And that's why, yes, and that's why we went, that they would be eligible to apply for straight for the 21 million.
And not worry about the Medicaid match.
Yes, true.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. It would speed it up quite a bit.
Yes, you would.
Well, it's all federal money.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you, Director Campbell, for being here and answering the numerous questions that we had this morning and into the afternoon about the money that's been requested by the agencies since mid-April.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Since Senator McGinn has stepped out, why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and then we'll discuss recommendations to those that court council.
They're not going to spend all
think they are.
Same attitudes to this job. Watch me close. Take care. You know, this I don't know. Soon, it would not make sense. Imagine, I think somebody would squash that. I never know that they might have been. And then who knows what next? Depending on who talking about it. Just what side. Yeah. I think almost spend. I mean, it's not. $15 million. If we could get 21 million to the nursing home, and not. I just need a rating, please. This thing. I think it's got to go through the agency, so whatever program, that's how. So, I mean, I think the only way that they get it to, rating. It's a rating, that rating. I don't know if they can do it for the application. I think the application grant that you did is a great model for us to start. Julie did. Have a really good. But I think that executive, there may be some things that we need to allocate X number. We need to make some judgments. So that would be phase one, please. Phase 1.5. We got that. So there we go. It's kind of like opening it, and then we can do phase 1.7. So you hold it this way. We work out very office. You gotta get it out as quick as you can, because they won't know what to do. It's gonna take them a long time. I never get shot back and have nothing to do with choice but to see it. So that's why I keep raising, can we legally yes. Yes. Go back to new discussions of Jennison. Well, I know it means what can they, we put in our we keep that and whatever we think. That on our last minute. Okay. And that's what you do. And that's what you're doing is looking at the last minute. Here's one thing. He's getting medical help. Because he said, how do we keep track? And do we have to republish our budget every time you all send it? I don't know the answer. Maybe you should talk to somebody that's on the city council. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I should know. Answer that. Oh, that's a good question. Well, I don't think, I think if we need to make, is it possible for us to put this on like, even so they don't. We can go on and send it. Used to say, what are your concerns? No, I mean, you know, because we came out and shut down. Because yeah. And that's what I'm sure I know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would think that other I think it should be. Those are more of the McKinney. Yeah. Yeah, and not. And that's what this is going to come up, as an issue.
Right, this amazing thing to make people get hungry. Well, I hate it. I'm set up for it. So I bring good pizza. I'm like, hungry or sick? I don't know. We don't care about sleeping. We'll go all night.
It's the hungriness that gets good.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we do.
It's true.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Actually, I probably
I know. Yeah, it's not short before the long night. Special question. Oh my goodness.
Because, and that was before, I mean, that was before the project that even got out. It was really.
That was just kind of to deal with revenue fall.
Right. And it's just like, we're gonna have to manage this money. Maybe. This is all right. Well, we'll see what they do. I heard you.
I just know on what stage.
Oh.
And then I think that's the big most stage.
I guess.
That's why we're gonna go like. Three, I don't need to say
Oh.
So we can do it each item by consensus. And then.
Then for you, did you will have for us? I don't think it would work as you. Like do a report that you will have in writing or something to deliver to. I just wonder where.
Meeting tomorrow, we're gonna decide the date. What is our main reason for meeting? To give us recommendations. Okay. And then I think I read somewhere, maybe it was in Hoppers, but anyway, I read somewhere where they had some certain interims in there. And ours is. Yes, no, do I need to go talk about that? Who does the planning? This one. Oh, Cliff, okay. I got somebody I need to see. So we'll get that meeting done.
Couldn't want research in your body. Already figure out how you find
Could they go ahead and send it
yeah.
What
we agree upon. And then I assume. Or is the report just submitted and then LCC?
Are they coming here? Can we keep this set up and then?
Well, I think that's a big factor.
I was gonna go home. If we met, we could be on Zoom in case they have questions about it.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'm gonna talk to Chase anyway, but that might not be a bad idea. We plan on going home, I plan on going home. So since this is already set up, David, I'll talk to Chase and you talk to Chase, but we could be on Zoom if they have questions.
Yeah, because I wasn't planning. I didn't know there was a meeting.
Yeah. That'd be good.
So we'll just open it.
Yeah, we need to know.
And then if there is, just then, we just have ideas and sure
That we have
Gosh, you can just-
some redesign. So if you're isolated,
that was the official vote.
you can still have contact.
But nobody can call the question, right?
And then. Yeah.
True, that's true.
We need to have.
Oh, right, you guys don't call the question, you just are saying.
Yeah, you're a leader, does all the time. Oh.
So that you go.
People can listen to it on live stream.
You go to. Some of these.
Well, they heard it on YouTube. And it was nothing. All right, committee, I think we're all in the room, we're just not in our respective seats. So we'll go ahead and get started. Since this is kind of an unprecedented way of kind of doing things, because this is going to be a recommendation that we're going to make to the Legislative Coordinating Council, which they will be meeting tomorrow. And so Senator McGinn and I are going to be available if they would choose to take these items up tomorrow for discussion, to answer any questions from the committee meeting that we had today in regards to the items. So there's no real formal motion that is going to be made in regards to what's going to be included in the recommendation. What we'll do is we'll just kind of open discussion up for each item, whether or not to have that included in the recommendation. And then have discussion, and hopefully, I think the discussion we've already had this morning with Director Campbell, and then also with other individuals from the other agencies and departments, hopefully we can generate a consensus on a majority of the items. So we'll just open it up for discussion. The first is going to be item number 1, the Department of Children and Families. Senator again.
I would support this funding because of the fact that even though it's going to be a triple impact out there with those individuals involved in foster care, but it's the fact that we were not able to have omnibus is the reason why we could not take care of these caseloads.
Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I support the funding too, but I believe we ought to try to get it out of this, the Medicaid expansion money, 17.5. So I would be more willing to say that let's suggest to the governor's office that goes through the State Finance Council to spend out of the $17.5 million.
He's getting this good too.
Right. Either way, it's state funds. Okay.
Any further discussion, Senator Hall?
I could support that, but I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So I'll leave it up to either LCC or state finance. So I wouldn't get hung up on where the source is. It's whatever they feel more comfortable with.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, but the $50 million that we had in the budget bill was subject to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee reviewing those items and going to the Legislative Coordinating Council. The $17.5 million, the LBC did not have any authority in looking over those items. It just directly goes to the State Finance Council. Is that correct? So we can make a recommendation to the governor's office to have this item included in a State Finance Council.
that would leave more additional dollars as the year progresses for us to address items that the LBC would directly be responsible for. So I do agree with Representative Hoffman that we could actually take this item, have it be a recommendation, and we can have a letter drafted by the research department or advisors of whoever to the governor's office requesting that this be an item of the State Finance Council. And that way we don't have 11.6 already out the door. If there's something else that we need to address later on in the year, because as we mentioned before, Senator McGinn has already requested 15 meeting days for the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. This allows us more breathing room in the $50 million that we actually do need.
Here. It doesn't matter, it just needs to be funded.
Director Campbell?
This is evolving. It's going to take a lot to come to you all with a solution on the 650 million. We would propose you do this here because that other could be part of this fix on the budget.
Representative Moore. Amy just made a point, sorry, Representative Moore, that the 17.5 million is not available until actually fiscal year 2021. And DCF is saying that they need this to draw down the federal funds now.
That was the point I was going to make. I didn't think it was available to 21, so if we want to make sure we get this done, we probably ought to do it under our authority today and then make a strong recommendation to the State Finance Council. Thank you.
Senator Hawk.
Yeah, in light of that, I think we ought to go ahead and do it now. I think we'll have plenty of things to talk about. And if we don't have as much money, I don't think there's anything that keeps us from making recommendations either to the Spark Group or to the State Finance Council.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so item number 1 for the Department of Children and Families for $11.6 million will be included in our recommendation to the LCC. Department of Corrections, I think there's no reason why we would need to have that included because actually they withdrew it, option 12. Department of Health and Environment, it was revised for fiscal year 2021. Discussion on that. Senator McGinn.
I think we had some very good discussion on this, and they can certainly come back and ask for more, but I think we had a good discussion about the fact that the counties are going to receive money, and we should see how that money can flow down to their own local health departments.
I would agree. Representative Carter.
I would agree with that. The counties that I've talked to are going to have trouble spending their COVID money anyway, so this would be a perfect expense.
Okay. So I think the consensus is not going to be recommended by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. However, we would basically state that the counties are responsible for the local health departments and administering funds for items. State Fair for $205,000 for lost revenue. Discussion. Representative Hoffman.
Well, I think we probably need to go ahead and pay it simply because I'm not sure they'll make it through the fiscal year unless we do. So, I would suggest that we pay it.
And kind of the comments when we were having the discussion with Director Jennison, $205,000 is greatly affected based off their budget. And we all know that the state fair budget has been tight for many, many years. And so I would agree to go ahead and have that $205,000 included in the recommendation. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Judiciary for $1.7 million. I would just probably say that in the discussion that we had with Director Campbell, there are other options. And I believe there was also money approved yesterday, State Finance Council to the Judiciary. So I would probably contend that not be included. Senator McGinn. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Highway Patrol for approximately $1.1 million. Again, in the conversation we had with Director Campbell, there are other options for the Highway Patrol to address those funds. So my contention would be not to have that included as well. Discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Department of Aging and Disability Services for $7.7 million. Discussion on that. Senator McGinn.
I was thinking that we could perhaps draft a letter of request to the governor's office on this request, and hope that the governor would bring it up during our next State Finance Council meeting that we're going to be having before the 1st.
I would agree with that. Senator Hawk.
I think we need to add that we would encourage the governor to request the Spark Executive Committee consider funding that out of the phase 2 money, the 1.5.
So I guess going back to Senator McGinn.
Does that mean it has to go through Spark?
Have it go through Spark first, and then Spark would then go to the State Finance Council.
And we're just going to run Spark.
Right.
I'm fine with that process.
All right, so we will have a statement drafted to the Executive Committee of Spark. Yes. And then whenever the State Finance Council meets again, or whenever the Spark meets again, they'll forward that on to the governor's office. Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when is Spark supposed to meet again? Do you know?
Well, the task force was going to meet, or the steering committee was going to meet on the 22nd. However, as Senator McGinn mentioned before, we haven't received anything from the 4 members here. I haven't received anything at all, so I would take it we're not meeting on Monday.
My concern would be that if we wait too long, that if they're needing proper supplies and they don't have them, that's one of my concerns.
Well, and maybe in the letter, if this is all right with the suggestion by Senator Hawk and Senator McGinn, is that we say that our preference would be to have it go through the Spark Committee. However, if they do not meet by the next State Finance Council meeting, then we have a discussion at the next State Finance Council meeting, because as Director Campbell agreed with me, is that we're going to be meeting before the end of the fiscal year, because we have to.
Okay, I think that'd be.
So yeah, if Spark doesn't meet, then it falls in on the State Finance Council.
Good idea, thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yeah.
All right, so in our recommendation to the LCC, which they will forward on to Spark, is that we would like to have this funding directed towards the Spark Committee, but if they do not happen to meet, then we would basically like the state finance council to review the funds. See that?
Yes, sir, you're nasty. And what you're doing is you're asking L60 to do that, thus it would not be a
Correct.
violation
It'd
of
be-
policy 33, because LBC is reporting to LCC, asking them to do that.
Correct. Yes. Making sure we're all legal.
She has.
All right. The next two items in regards to the Kansas Bureau of Investigations. The first item for $520,000 in fiscal year 2021. In the discussion that we had with Director Campbell, there are other options for that. So I would contend that we do not include that particular item. However, on the fingerprint identification system, this is something we did hear about quite a bit during the 2020 legislative session. It needs to be updated. Obviously, the servicing contract is going to be ending at the end of this year, and then the time frame to set up a new system. I would probably go ahead and have it. Can. Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it needs to be funded. And I was thinking that we would just fund it through this, but I'm wondering, because that one is in 21, that maybe we should send that one to the State Finance Council for that money to come out of that 17 million.
Discussion.
That's just an idea.
Senator Carter, Representative Carpenter, and Senator Hall.
Yeah, I don't have a question on Representative Hoskins' deal. I just had a very quick question. Was this 6.8 million, was that in omnibus, was that in your budget?
I actually, it was a GBA, we said GBA 2.
Yes. Yes.
And I know we had discussions in the appropriations committee about it, and I can't remember, did we put this off to omnibus or did GBA on that? That's what we were discussing. Okay, at the time that we had the committee meetings, there was no dollar figure. No concrete dollar figure. And so that's why it was GBA 2, is because we had a dollar figure, which is $6.8 million. And so that's why it was later. When we did have the discussion with the Transportation Public Safety Budget Committee, there was a dollar figure to be affixed with it.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Hall.
I thought I heard Director Thompson say if he got this approved, he would be putting out an RFP.
I think the RFP is already ready.
It's already ready to go. We don't know if it's going to be exactly this amount of money, but likely, I guess.
I think it's pretty specific. Director Campbell.
Correct, that's what's been, That's what's been going on. It's been around for years, but they didn't have a pinpoint number. I feel pretty strongly that they feel, I've asked them that directly, they feel pretty good about the 6.8.
Well, I agree with Representative Hoffman, asking State Finance Council to look at that. You know, he changed his mind just when I finally agree with him after all the years.
Representative Hoffman.
I'm sorry, Senator Hawk. Yeah, we agree. And I've got it. I have all these great ideas and they never come to fruition. Yeah, we can't use the 17.5 because it specifically says it has to be used for the COVID treatment. So we can't do that. So we would have to go back to us.
I could argue that everybody who gets positive on COVID has fingerprints.
That's true.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, so the item for the KBI will be included in the recommendation to the LCC for $6.8 million. On the second page, the Kansas Commission on Veterans Affairs Office recommended by the Department of Budget that be included for $830,000. Any discussion? Representative Carpenter.
I just might add, this was discussed at length with behind Director Campbell and during the budget process with the veterans. And the only reason it was included in the omnibus was because we didn't have an omnibus. So, yeah, it's a good thing. We got to have it.
Okay. Senator again.
I must have missed our earlier conversation, I forgot, but did we talk about whether or not that would qualify under the CARES money?
Well, Director Campbell may be able to answer this question, but this is actually a budget issue that's been going on for some time. And has happened because of the low rates of participation in folks, and it's just, it should have been taken care of in the past.
I just saw increased cleaning and sterilizing equipment. To me, that qualifies, but.
Yeah, it's really about the enrollment numbers in the veterans homes.
Thank you.
Giving you that, Director Campbell. Good. Any further discussion? Okay, that amount will be included in the recommendation to the LCC. The next item, the Department of Commerce, which is a total of 25 million, not the 37 million in 2020 and 18 million in 2021. So discussion on that item for the job creation fund. President Hoffman.
I don't suppose this can come out of sacred news. I'm looking through the what was provided for us by the Department of Commerce. It looks like that they used $5 million for the hire program, and so I guess I would maybe make the recommendation that we go ahead and backfill that $5 million right now. I know that would make them whole as far as the commitments they have out there right now. I would love it that they would be able to use all 18 million, but I'm pretty positive that not every company that they made an offer to is going to take up the offer. So they probably aren't going to spend all of it. And they can always come back later and maybe after they went through some of what they have out right now, come back to us later and say, hey, we need an additional. I guess my recommendation would be $5 million. I'm not sure if it really matters if it's in 20 or 21.
Well, I have a question for staff. It says here on page 81 of the document that we received, the job creation fund has received $3.5 million in funding in the last 3 fiscal years. Is that 3.5 million total for the last 3 years, or 3.5 million each year for the last 3 years? Each year. Okay, so they've just received 3.5 million allocated each year for the last 3 fiscal years. And I believe Secretary Tolan said that the balance is 16 million. Yeah, 16.7 million on page 83, with a commitment of 18.5. So basically you have a $2 million difference. So the $5 million would be, would you be willing to change that to 5.5 million? So you have the 3.5 million and the $2 million difference between the available balance and what's out. And then in 2021, we have a stipulation that this committee will be available to administer any other funds that we deem necessary out of the $50 million COVID-19 money for any potential businesses that may be being recruited to the state of Kansas.
I think so. So it would be 5.5 million plus they're also getting 3.5 million. Is that what you're thinking?
No, total is 5.5. 3.5 million that was allocated each year.
Oh, okay. So
And then the $2 million
$2 million
difference,
difference.
so it's 5.5 million.
Okay, that'd be fine. Yes.
That's Senator McGinn and Senator Hall.
And that this be brought back to us the next time we meet with more
Yes.
information.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I heard you say would give the Department of Commerce some confidence that they could pursue businesses and make tentative offers to them. It would just need our approval should they have some things in the hopper that look promising.
Yes, yeah.
I definitely want them, and I heard Secretary Tolan say pretty clearly that this is a prime recruiting time. I heard Senator McGinn talk about why people are wanting to come to Kansas. So if your intent with that, and that is clearly communicated to the Department of Commerce and the Secretary, that they sort of have tentative approval to pursue additional businesses, and I'm going to hope that they spend all of that 18.5 they have committed, and that we backfill that, and they have that. That would mean that they don't have, what do we think, 3.5 then to go ahead and know they could count on, but that we're actually telling them that it's very likely that if they had some great prospects, we will meet again and give them to go ahead and do that out of this money. Is that what I'm hearing your intent is?
Yes, that's the intent. And if you recall the conversation that we had with Secretary Tolan, where they had basically $18 million out in commitments right now, and the fund is short. So we do need to backfill that in case those commitments do come through. Plus, he said that the recruiting efforts compared to last year is tripled to where it's been. So we do have, I mean, I hate to say this, but if there's anything promising that maybe has come out of this is that, as Senator McGinn mentioned, maybe people are looking for stability within the state of Kansas and want to relocate their businesses here. And so we need to make sure that we position ourselves to make sure that we can live up to those commitments the Department of Commerce is going to be making out to those businesses. So let's go ahead and backfill the $2 million that's short from the commitments already out there. And then also let's do the 3.5 million, so it would be 5.5 million. And because as Secretary Tolan said, which possibly could be more, if you're looking at a potential of 22,000 jobs, and you're looking at a return on investment of $1 to $39 within the economy for the state of Kansas, I think we need to position ourselves for this economic recovery with the state and have them come back to us the next time we meet to basically give us more details on what is needed for the recruitment of businesses in the state of Kansas. Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe, looking back at JG and Jill, and Amy, the $3.5 million is already in the budget, so they're gonna get a $3.5 million come July 1, the authorization for that. So I think our recommendation would just be $2 million at this time. Okay.
I would probably disagree with that. Just because of the amount of applications that are out there, that we have no idea when the LBC is going to be yet. And so let's go ahead and position them a little bit better than from the request that was made. And because, they were asking for initially $37 million for fiscal year 2020.
Right, I'm just trying to understand. So we're going to make the request for 5.5 million. So they're actually going to have about $8 million. Kind of July 1.
Closer to 9.
Closer to 9, somewhere in there. Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood exactly what you're on. Okay.
And so that way they do have the fluidity of trying to recruit businesses, depending on when the next time we meet. Representative Warren.
So I want to give them all the tools they need to get what they need done. And so part of this recommendation is assuring us that we will have an update from Secretary Tolan at the next meeting, and we will have, as appropriate, be able to use an additional part of this 50 million towards exams if necessary. We're committing to.
Correct, and also assist Representative Hoffman that we could also, at that time, when Secretary Tolan comes and addresses the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, we could possibly already have another Spark meeting. And then we had a lengthy discussion in regards to economic development and seeing what tools maybe Spark can utilize through the CARES Act money to generate businesses or recruit businesses in the state of Kansas. But I think we just need to position them to go out there and actively go out there and recruit them. Because time is of the essence.
Okay, yeah, and 5.5 is fine. Yeah, I just want to clarify, make sure we both understanding that. So, yeah.
Senator Hall.
I was originally going to suggest a compromise of 12.5, but I'll support finally my friend over there, Representative Hoffman, for the 5.5, but I want it to be clearly seen by the department as a vote of confidence in what they reported today, and that the likelihood of us supporting them further is great. We just need more information.
Any further discussion? Just to clarify, staff aid was assessing, but that's going to go ahead and go into fiscal year 2020. Okay, that's the consensus of the group. Okay. We'll move on to the last item, and that is the Board of Regents, 13.1 million for online courses. No recommendation from the Department of Budget. Actually, we didn't have any discussion on this item as well. Very limited, but
that they possibly have some other options here, and we need to have them take a look at that first.
plus all the federal money that higher ed has received, possibly look at other options as was discussed. Senator Hawk.
For the four of us that are on Spark, do we think there might be some good possibilities, since education is one of our four areas we're focusing on, that we might have more money not only for the Regent system, but also for private schools coming from Spark funds?
Well, I know in the breakout session that we had, which Senator McGinn and I were in the same breakout session, we talked about obviously there's this anticipation that possibly a second wave could occur in the fall, and how do we position our institutions of learning, whether that be K through 12 or higher education, to prepare much better. I mean, there was no preparation when we made the decision to close the school buildings in March. And so if that second wave comes, how can we prepare your universities, your community colleges, your schools within K through 12 in going back to an online format? And so that was a discussion that we had, and that could possibly be some of the CARES money could be used for that as well. And that's why I think either Director Campbell or we had a conversation here. There's other options for the Board of Regents to look at. Again, as I kind of, because it's my area of the state, but I kind of plugged Fort Hays State University and meeting that we had with Spark, because they were one of the first universities to utilize online classroom. And I think that would be a great partner in trying to administer this through a state level. But obviously there are other options for them to look at the funding instead of the money that we have within the LBC. Representative Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're not going to fund them here today. We're going to, as Spark committee members, we're going to have to push hard for money to go to higher ed through that, because the expense in sending school kids back to colleges in a safe way and dorms and the testing that'll have to be done could be just unbelievably costly. So I think we don't do it here, we're gonna have to advocate for them in the Sparks Committee, task force, that we get funds in a way so that they can open safely. And as you or someone mentioned, we don't know what's gonna happen during the school year in terms of a second wave, so we're gonna have to be prepared for that also. Thank you.
Then, as as mentioned before, I mean, the four major areas that we discussed in Spark is infrastructure, healthcare, economic development, and education. And higher ed is a big part of that.
I'm just hoping that I get my Wildcat plastic football bubble so that I can attend a victory for the K-State Wildcats as well. Just being helpful. So I want to make sure there's a possibility for that. Thank you.
As mentioned, they have other options, and so that'll obviously be a discussion that we have with Spark. Okay, so that's the agreement of the group. So the recommendation that we have, the state, or not the state, the legislative coordinating council, the 11.6 for DCF, state fair. Then we have a recommendation to the LCC, the State Finance Council, about 7.7 million on KDAS. Kansas Commission on Veterans Affairs Office, and then 5.5 million to the Department of Commerce for the job creation project. And the KBI for 6.8. So Amy, or
It's pretty good.
so we have approximately allocated $25.2 million, which would basically leave us with half of that for further meetings. So, Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a question on that. I can't remember, was that 50 million in 2020 fiscal year or 2021? And then how does that, if it's in 2021, how does that work?
If I remember right, this discussion came up in conference committee. And I think the Senate position was 2021. And then we agreed on the House position of 2020 because we thought we needed it right away. And so it is in fiscal year 2020.
And the question, it can roll over, and we still have the second authority. That was
Yes.
my question, okay. All right.
Correct. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned.
Short meeting, huh?
If you're going home tomorrow, look for me out.